Anusha.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. So glad to see you all. Today is going to be our last session for the GIT module, which is a little bit bittersweet, of course. But we have a fun topic today, so we'll be talking about herbs, and specifically, we'll be going through the herbs in the list that you have in your notes, in your Grahani notes, the Dipaniya Gana, as per Charaka Samhita, so the 10 herbs. There was one of the herbs that I didn't put in our list because it's not as widely available here. And instead I replaced it with guruchi because that is available and that's quite useful in both of these conditions. So I just wanted to give you an idea as to how we select these herbs and why those have been included under the use for these particular GIT conditions. Because now you know what the pathology is behind these different diseases, and they may present in very different ways, but ideally the source of the problem is really the Agni, and it starts at the Agni. So what all of these herbs do is they act specifically on the Agni. But it's also good to know the background behind the tastes and the different properties according to Ayurveda. And also some of the other indications of these herbs as well. Because sometimes, I've started to notice is that we assume that these combinations of these herbs have a certain property because of what it's used for. And to some extent that may be true, but it's better if you look at the actual properties of the herbs. Because if you look at the properties of the herbs, you really start to understand exactly what it is acting on for this particular condition. Okay, so and that's the reason why it has so many different indications. Like one herb can be used for multiple disorders. Okay, so before we start, Mike had a really good question. And Mike, would you like to ask your question? Because I would like to answer that before we get started on this. I think it's a really good, really important question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the role of Triphala was in the whole spectrum of the GIT, and was it supportive for the topic that we're working on?
Okay, thank you. So that's a really good question because Triphala is a very, very common, very widely used combination. And the three herbs or three drugs in that is amlaki, which is gooseberry, haritaki, and vibhitaki, okay? Terminalia chebula and Terminalia arjuna, I believe. So these three herbs, or these three fruits actually, in equal quantity is what makes up Triphala. Now, Triphala can be combined in different proportions. Like, for instance, you have these three fruits. We use the dried fruits, and you can use them in a proportion of 1 to 2 to 3. And you can also mix and match the proportions according to the therapeutic use that you want for it. Now, Triphala works quite well on the GIT for maintenance of health. However, when there is an issue with the lower Agni, Triphala doesn't necessarily increase the Agni. Okay, Triphala doesn't have that action. As you'll notice here, in all of the drugs that we talked about that act on the Agni, that are Dipaniya, which means it increases the Agni, or Pachana, which helps to digest Ama, none of the herbs or none of the fruits of Triphala have been mentioned. Because they may have a mild reaction to that, or may have a mild action on the Agni, but you can't really label it Dipaniya or Pachaniya because it's not strong enough compared to other herbs, which really represent that reaction. That's the reason why Triphala hasn't been included in what I've been talking to you about, is because it doesn't really have such a large impact on the Agni. Whereas these herbs do have a specific action on the Agni. They have been labeled as Dipaniya, and not just it possesses that property, but it is one of the ideal or the best options for increasing the Agni and for digesting Ama. Okay, so Triphala really helps to maintain the GIT health. Like for instance, if someone is in a state of health, or someone is doesn't really have too many issues, whatever their prakriti may be, but they're fairly healthy and they don't have any of the issues that we talked about, even they don't have any of these premonitory signs and symptoms, which we have talked about in these different conditions. So whether it be Purva Rupa of Grahini or whether it be Purva Rupa of Ashas, you know, those signs and symptoms are very general, but it indicates that there is a disturbance. If the person doesn't really have that and they want to have it more for longevity, then they can have Triphala. However, even the continuous use of Triphala comes with caution. And this is a good thing to remember, why one size does not fit all in Ayurveda, which we know by now, and thinking that just because something is good means that we need to take it all the time also does not apply in Ayurveda. Okay, if something is good, you take it for when you need it, and after, if you're fine, you don't need that anymore. Okay, and Triphala is also one of those things. Though Triphala is Rasayana, it is a rejuvenative combination. It does help to support the dhatus. It helps for proper absorption of nutrients and assimilation of nutrients from the food that you're eating. But what Triphala has also is abhaya. Abhaya, or let me see what, 1 second here. Abhaya actually is a herb that cannot be used in excess for a long period of time. And the reason why is because that specific fruit actually decreases the Shukra Dhatu if used continuously for a longer period of time. Okay, so if you're using it for like about a month or for up to 6 weeks, it's okay. But beyond that point, and that too used for a specific purpose, if beyond that point you need to stop, you can't take it beyond that point, because you're taking it for too long of a period, it can actually start to produce side effects of that it will actually start to reduce the Shukra Dhatu and could even result in impotency, or it could even result in infertility. And that is a specific correlation of what happens with excessive intake or consumption of abhaya. Okay, so you want to make sure, again, Triphala, we typically know that, or a lot of people say that Triphala is great, it's wonderful, you can take it all the time, you can have it every single day. No, you can't. You want to take Triphala only for a certain period of time. Even if you want to do it for Rasayana or for longevity, you take it for a maximum of 6 weeks, then stop. And after, when you stop it, you need to do a mild shodhana, or a mild cleanse. So all of these cleanses that you guys have learned till now, this is when these cleanses apply. Even these cleanses apply as for the Ritu Sandhi, or the time when there is a change from one season to the next. Those are the times that what we are commonly coming across for these seasonal cleanses. That's the time when that's appropriate. And it really does help to reduce the intensity of the transformation of the doshas from one seasonal variation to the next seasonal variation. And also, when you've been taking I thought this was more of a a lot of people, again, have labeled these combinations and it's kind of a misconception that you can take this anytime and you can take it for as long as you like. Nothing in Ayurveda says that you can take it for the rest of your life, because if you're taking it for the rest of your life, that's a dependency. Okay, and we don't want anyone to be dependent. What we want to achieve, what our ideal goal is, for you to become healthy and strong enough that you do not need any dependency, and that includes herbs. You need to be able to be very happy and healthy with just your regular consumption of your diet and do whatever activities you need to do without feeling unhealthy. And if, for instance, your work or your activities is you anticipate is going to cause a problem, then you need to take things that's going to help to balance that effect off. Or if your diet that you cannot control, you're exposed to a certain diet, or you travel, or whatever the reason may be, and you cannot change that, then you can use herbs to help to balance off or to maintain your health, even with this maybe not so ideal diet. That's when you want to take it. And even then, you do not want to take it forever. You take it for a certain period of time, and then you stop. And then you give it a rest and give your body a chance to cleanse out any excess of those qualities, and then you can start it back again. Okay, so nothing in Ayurveda ever says that you need to take it continuously for the rest of your life. The only thing you need to do that is food. Food is the only thing you need to take every single day for the rest of your life. You're welcome. I know. So I've kind of just burst a few bubbles there, is that, you know, Triphala is great. We can have Triphala. Anyone can take Triphala. That's not the case. And it's the same thing with Chyawanprash, which again has been a very misused combination, but you do not need to take Chyawanprash every day. Chyawanprash is an actual medicinal formula, and it has a specific indication and a specific use. If you use it appropriately, it will produce the effects that you want, the therapeutic effects. However, if you misuse or you overuse any one of these formulas, you're going to start to see the side effects of that. So this is where we come under the realm of understanding that Ayurvedic medicines do have side effects when they're not used appropriately. Okay? It's not that we do not have side effects. We do have side effects if we're not using it appropriately. So that's why it's really important to learn about the formulas and to learn about the herbs and their properties and how they have combined to produce a synergistic effect, so that when someone's consuming it, we can understand what reaction is happening. And it's not just like a typical sort of formula that you have this disease, this is what you take, and this is what you take. Even for the takra, what you guys have seen now, is that it depends. It may be the ideal thing that we want to give. However, it doesn't always work for everyone, because sometimes people just don't like the taste of it. And if you don't like the taste of it, that in itself becomes an aversion to them. So instead of producing the wonderful therapeutic properties or activity that you expect it to produce, instead it induces a reaction because the person just doesn't like it. So even in that liking quality, we have to keep in mind the same, like we were describing in the class, is that if someone can't handle the taste of spices, you can't expect to ask them to take all of these, put these spices in their food and eat it, because they just cannot handle that flavor. Instead, you have to find a way to bypass this section of their digestive tract so that it gets to the next section of their digestive tract. So that's when putting it in the form of a capsule or a pill really helps, so that they don't have to deal with it over here. But that all of these factors are really, really important in how a person reacts to whatever you're advising them. Okay? I think just blew. Well, I'm glad that we got Mike. Thank you for bringing up that question, because I know that actually last week the reason why I decided to do the information on the herbs was when we were talking about Vpakka Churna, and everyone seemed to think that Vpakka Churna is cooling, and it's not. It's absolutely not cooling. In fact, if you look at the herbs specifically, look at the combination of herbs there and go through and find the properties of each and every herb, you'll notice that none of those, maybe 2 or 3 of them are cooling, but for the most part, the majority are not cooling at all. In fact, the like I mentioned, the major ingredient or active component in that formula is Trivrit. And Trivrit, what it does is it induces purgation. And because it induces purgation, that is why it is ideal for pacifying excess Pitta. And even when you have excess pitta, it's not cooling down the pitta, it's pushing out the pitta. It acts as a shodhana drug and not a shamana drug. So I hope that's kind of clear now why that works in a pitta condition. You, in any herb that you're using, you can use it in two different ways. You can help it with opposite qualities or properties that would help to pacify the doshas. You can also use different herbs that will help to expel out the excessive dosha. So in this case, avipatti is expelling out the excessive pitta. That's why it is indicated in pitta vriddhi or pitta aggravated conditions, not in the cooling property, but in the passing out property. Okay? Okay, let me see some of these questions here, but this is great. Yes, I've been taking it for 10 years. Funny that I just ran out 2 days ago. And how long to take Chyawanprash to maintain good health? The taste is very important in taking herbs. Absolutely. So in Chyawanprash, if you want to take it for maintaining health, first, if you're doing, for instance, Rasayana, and you're trying to increase, you're trying to rejuvenate their health, you're trying to increase the production and the health of the dhatus. First, in any type of Rasayana therapy, you want to, again, increase the Agni. Because whatever it is that you're administering needs to be digested. Only if it gets digested at the Jataragni, then it starts to get digested at the Dhatu level, then it can then start to produce new healthy Dhatus. That's what, remember, we looked at the process or the physiology of how the Dhatus are formed. This is why increasing the Agni is really key and crucial in order to then achieve that Rasayana effect. So after increasing the Agni, then you can take Chyawanprash without, if the person has absolutely no other condition where that is indicated. Then you can take Chyawanprash for maintaining health for at least around, I would say, a month to maximum around 6 weeks. Because even then, you don't want to overdo it. You do not need to have Chyawanprash for more than that time. Even if you feel that you haven't reached to the highest level of rejuvenation or Rasayana, then you can stop it at around 6 weeks. Do a mild cleanse. Try to, again, Chyawanprash is actually a very heavy formula to digest because it is a lehya. A lehya is a type of, or a linctus or a jam. It's a jam that's actually somewhat heavy to digest. So if you're taking this continuously for 6 weeks, it has the potential to actually lower your Agni because it becomes too much, okay? So you do not want it to overburden your Agni or overburden your body. So that's why you stop at 6 weeks, then you do a mild shodhana or a mild cleanse, and then you start to rebuild the Agni again. And only if it's necessary, then you start back. But if it's not necessary, you do not need to go back on the Chyawanprash. Okay? Okay? Is that clear? Okay. So I'm glad that this has kind of really struck everyone's curiosity. There's one, is Trikatu is good to take for Deepana Pachana? Yes, Trikatu is very good to take for Deepana and Pachana. But again, even in Trikatu, you do not want to take it all the time. It's not necessary. It's not necessary to take Trikatu every single day or all the time. What you want, the whole point of all of these herbs or all of these combinations is to increase the Agni. If you increase the Agni, what that's going to do is it's going to then maintain the health of the Agni and let it keep going. It doesn't mean, remember in Ayurveda, you don't do this where you increase the Agni and then you eat all this really heavy food and then you kill the Agni and then you keep eating the Trikatu so that will allow you to eat really heavy to digest food. It doesn't work that way. You take the Trikatu, so you increase the Agni, and then it helps in igniting the Agni. And when the Agni is ignited, after that, you don't need the Trikatu anymore. Because what that would do is, if the Agni is already ignited and you keep adding Trikatu, it's going to make it worse. The whole point of it is to get it to that stage. Once it gets to the normal intensity, then stop. If you go beyond that normal stage, that's when what happens that it starts to become excessive. And then you end up with these side effects of this. So just like in any medicine, there's usually a time period for when you want to take it. If these things produce an effect, which we do, we know that they do, they produce an effect, then that means that that effect is only needed for a certain period of time. You don't expect to want to have that substance consistently producing that effect. Okay? So that's the reason why you don't want to have to take Trikatu every single day. You know, you can eat food with different spices. That's a very small quantity that's mixed into the food and helps to enhance or create the food in such a way that it's easily digestible. But it's not that you're adding in on top of that a teaspoon of Trikatu to the food to be able to digest it. Your Agni should be strong enough to be able to digest that even without the Trikatu. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so now I want to start off on our topic today of the herbs, and we'll try to get through as many of them as possible. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the PowerPoint because there's some really nice little pictures. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here we have. So all of these herbs that we're talking about, of course, they act on the Chaturagni. And that's the reason why they have been classified by Charaka Samhita as the Dipaniya Gana. Gana means a group of drugs. And Dipaniya, so it is the group of drugs that produce this Dipaniya effect that help to increase the Agni. Okay? And of course, again, just a quick reminder why we want to make sure that we have an increased Agni. So we want to increase the Jatra Agni. That also helps to increase all of the Dhatu Agnis. And in that process, whatever you're putting into the stomach afterwards, whatever food you're consuming gets properly digested, then goes on to these dhatus, and this gets properly digested here. That will then form healthy new dhatus. Okay, it will nourish the already existing dhatu and then transform and produce healthy new dhatus. And that's basically what the effect of Rasayana actually is. Okay, so of the drugs that we're going to talk about, this list is there in your Grahani notes. So it is the 10 herbs. I left out one and instead I replaced it with Guruji because that herb isn't as widely available. So the name of the herb that I replaced here is Amlavetsa. Amlavetsa isn't really as widely available here in the US. So instead of describing that today, I put in Guruchi. Guruchi doesn't actually belong to this list, but it is a very, very good and useful herb, which we've kind of slightly discussed a little bit earlier as well. Okay, so we'll go through each one of these herbs and look at the properties. So the first one is Pipali, and Pipali is Piper longum. So it's very much in like the black pepper. It's from the black pepper family, but it's slightly longer than the black pepper. So this is all of these references that we're talking about today is from the text Bhava Prakasha, which is the Laghutrei text that is sort of responsible for describing pharmacology, which is all of the properties and the Ayurvedic description of single herbs. Okay. Does someone want to mute their phone? Because I think there's a little bit of disturbance there. Okay. Okay. So the Rasa Guna Virya Vpakka of we're going to go through for all of the herbs. So Pipali, the rasa is Katu rasa. It's pungent, and you're going to notice that almost all of these herbs in this group are all pungent or predominantly pungent in taste. And that, remember, pungent in taste, it helps to, again, increase the Agni because it does have the fire element in there. Okay, the guna or qualities that it exists that has is it's laghu, so it's light and it's easy to digest, and it's also tikshna, or it's penetrating. The virya or the potency is ushna, and the difference here is pipali is actually it's mildly hot because it's a fruit. This pipali is indicating here the fruit part, or the this is the fruit. Okay. So that is, it's not as ushna, it's not very hot, but it's mildly hot. And the Vpakka here, notice that the Vpakka, even though being Katudasa, the Vpakka should be Katudasa, but it's not. Because it's the fruit, it is actually Madhura Rasa. So that's one, again, one sort of special quality of this is that it doesn't have that Katu Vpakka. So that's the reason why it is not as hot as some of the other parts of the plant. The prabhava, or the special quality of this plant, is that in its fresh state, when it's green, for instance, if you pick the fruit directly from the vine and you haven't dried it out yet, in the fresh state it actually increases kapha. It doesn't decrease kapha because of the fact in the fresh state it's more it has more of that madhura quality, or that madhura vipaka quality. And it also has the other qualities that it has is it's of course deepaniya. It increases the digestive fire, and it is snigdha, it is unctuous. So when it's in its green fresh state, it has more of that unctuous quality, or that snigdha quality, and that's why it can increase kapha. Other qualities that are there, or gunas that it has, is it's a rasayana, or natural rejuvenator. It also helps in pacifying vata and kapha. And it also is virechaniya. It can induce purgation. It's purgative, okay? So these are some of the gunas. The indications, as given in Bhava Prakasha, different diseases that this can be used in. So its indication is shwasa, which is breathing difficulties, any sort of breathing difficulty, which is basically looking at all sort of variations or pathologies associated with the pranavata. That all comes under the realm of shwasa. So that includes asthma, but not just restricted to only asthma alone. Okay, kasa is similarly coughing. So all sort of disorders that revolves around cough being the primary symptom, that comes under the realm of kasa. Udara is ascites, or fluid accumulation in the abdomen. Jwara is all different types of fevers. Kushta is all different types of skin disorders, including leprosy, including psoriasis. Basically, all types of skin disorders come under that description. Prameha is all urinary disorders, including diabetes. Prameha is not just diabetes alone. That's, again, another very common misconception. They translate prameha as diabetes, but it's not just diabetes. There are a lot of other urinary disorders that are described. Madhumeha is the correct description for diabetes, okay? And of that, there are 20 different types of pramehas. So many of the other types of pramehas actually describe certain other urinary disorders. Arshas, of course, hemorrhoids. Pliha roga is splenic disorders. Shula is any sort of pain in the abdomen, including colic pain. This works quite well for that. And amavata. Amavata is a condition where, due to ama that's settled in the joints, it stops the vata from moving. So therefore, it creates that vata sort of an envelope around the movement of vata, or it blocks vata. So vata starts to build and localize in the joints and becomes very painful and very difficult. And in that, the one difference between this and other forms of arthritis or arthritic pain is that it doesn't get relieved with oil. The main thing to differentiate between other types of rheumatic pain and this type of rheumatic pain is that in other types, where there's only vata or vata in another dosha, it will be relieved if you apply oil. But in this situation, because of the presence of ama, if you apply oil, the ama just increases. So therefore, if you apply oil in this type of rheumatic pain, it just increases the pain further instead of decrease it. Okay? Because the oil doesn't ever get in contact with the vata. The ama blocks it. So when you apply oil, it first goes to the ama instead of the vata. Okay? So these are just some indications of what is there in Pipali. Certain other types of properties that have been determined by certain studies, they've indicated that it is a diuretic. It is, of course, purgative. It's a great expectorant. It's anthelmintic, which means it helps to kill worms or parasites. And of course, it's a digestive. And it's thermogenic, so which means it helps to increase the body temperature or maintain the body temperature. Okay, so these are just some of the activities of Pipali. So now do you see that it's quite detailed when we look at single herbs and the combination of these herbs. It's very, very detailed in our perspective. It's not just that they've described some formulas or some combinations and we go with that. The reason, if you go more deep into the actual science or the concept of looking at the herbs and how they react and how they produce this reaction, just by looking at the Rasa Guna Virya Vipakka alone, we can figure out what the elemental composition is, because we know what the elemental composition is of Katurasa. We can understand what the elemental composition is of these particular qualities, which you know now. And if we put that together, we can figure out what the actual elemental predominance or combination is in this herb. And we also know what the elemental imbalance is in the person's body depending on what dosha predominance is there, right? If we break it down to this most basic level, then it's fairly easy for us to then understand what is the most appropriate herb for this particular deficiency or disturbance. And then you substitute in from the external to then balance off or pacify what's happening internally. And that's the concept of what we're doing with these herbs and with our food and with different therapeutics in Ayurveda. It really boils all the way down to the 5 elements. Okay, and that's of course at the body level. I'm not talking about the psychological level. I'm talking about the body level. Okay. Okay. So the next one is Pipali Mula, and it's basically the same plant, but here we were looking at the fruit. Pipali here really indicates the fruit, and these are the qualities of the fruit. This one is looking at the qualities of the root of the plant. Mula means root. Okay, so Pipali Mula, like Dashamula is 10 different roots. This is Pipali Mula, so it's the root of the Piper Longum plant. And the difference between the fruit and the root is the root has a higher concentration of the active ingredient, which is piperin. And because of that, and because of the higher concentration of the active ingredient, if we want to look at it in that perspective, it has a slightly more concentrated effect and a little bit of a higher qualities or gunas that really aggravate pitta. So when you look at Pipali, it's Ushna Virya, or it's hot in potency, but it's mildly hot. Whereas the root of Pipali is actually much more Ushna in comparison to the fruit. Okay, so the root has similar properties to that of Pipali. However, the additional added properties of that is that it is actually ruksha. So it's not snigdha or unctuous as the fruit is, but the root is actually dry. It causes or induces dryness. It increases pitta. The fruit may not necessarily increase pitta, but the root definitely does increase pitta. It is bhedi, which means it can cause, bhedi is another synonym for purgation or for virechana. So it induces purgation. Of course, it is kapha vata and udrapaha. Udrapaha here is another synonym for hara, or reducing. And so it mitigates, or it pacifies enlargement of the abdomen due to kapha and or vata. So for instance, if someone wanted to lose weight, and if their weight gain is due to actual deposition of fat, or deposition of too much of those fatty qualities in the abdomen, or even if it is due to excessive bloating that looks like it's fat but actually isn't, in both those cases this would work really well. Okay, so this Pipalimula really helps to reduce that enlargement in the abdomen due to kapha and or vata. And similarly, again, for anaha, which is flatulence, it helps to reduce flatulence. And it is krimigna, or it's indicated in the cases of krimi. So again, krimi in Ayurveda, it comes under multiple things, can be labeled as krimi. It can be, krimi can be a bacteria, krimi can be a fungal infection, krimi can be parasites, it's multiple things. Okay, so let me see here. As banyan does not carry chavya or pipalimula, what are the other sources for herbs that you use? You actually can get a lot of these herbs, some of these herbs from mountain rose, and now day by day, there are actually a lot more pharmacies and companies that are coming into the U.S. that are sourcing these herbs. So I would suggest look around and try and see what's going on or what's coming up, because Banyan isn't the only company that's out there. There are lots of other companies as well. So I would say go and look around. And one thing to remember, even though certain things are certified organic, just because other companies have not put in that organic stamp doesn't necessarily mean it's not organic. Okay, and I know this is a little bit hard to believe, and sometimes it does require a little bit more research as to where they're sourcing their plants from. But remember, some of the traditional pharmacies and the traditional farmers haven't caught up with the times and don't necessarily know that they need to have this organic certification. So they're just growing their plants and sourcing these herbs the way they've always been doing it for generations. And they haven't gone out to get someone to come and inspect their place to then certify them as organic. So just because it's not certified organic or labeled organic doesn't necessarily mean that it's of a poor quality. Okay, so like I said, do a little bit of research. Of course, I know that there are a lot of spurious and not so good quality drugs out there too. I do understand that. So do a little bit of research, call up the company. And I've done this before. You can call up any company and ask them where they source their materials from. And you can ask them where they process their materials. And by that, looking at where they're sourcing from and where they're getting where they're processing their products and packaging, you can find out and determine the quality of it. Okay, so you have every right as a consumer, as a person who is purchasing these products from this company, to call them and just ask them. Sometimes they offer the information, sometimes they don't, but you have every right to call them up and ask them, because I've done this as part of a study, called up the companies and asked them. Okay. Will Pipalimula be described as that, or will it be just called Pipali when listed on ingredients described? That's a good question. So if it is a classical formula, it'll be stated as Pipalimula. But in some of the other proprietary medicines or proprietary combinations where people are making up their own combinations and their own preparations and marketing that as a product, a new product, they may not necessarily put it in as Pipalimula. So in that case, again, you need to do a little bit of research behind what's available. I think one thing is there in our field is that we constantly have to keep investigating. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just to be on the safe side for you, and to get all the information. So in case your client asks you, or in case you have a question as to how something is reacting, then at least you know whether it's pipili or pipili mula. It's always good to just do the research as to where your ingredients are coming from and where they're processing. Like for instance, another good little tip, Triphala, in many cases, Triphala, you're only supposed to use the pulp of the fruit and not the seed. These are fruits, and all the fruits have seeds. However, you should not use the seed. You're only supposed to use the dry pulp, okay? And a good way for companies to increase the bulk and the weight of what they're selling is by powdering the dried seed along with the dried pulp. So it increases the quantity, and they can sell it as amla. For instance, amla, you'll get amla powder, and they'll sell it just as amla powder. If you're using amla powder with the seed powdered in, you're not going to get the same effects. It actually can create constipation. So you may have come across certain people taking Triphala and say that they ended up getting constipated. This is the reason why. Because they actually powdered the seed along with the pulp. If you're taking just the powdered pulp of those fruits, you will not end up with constipation. Okay. In fact, abhaya is also a slight purgative. Not a slight, it's quite a good, strong purgative. So that will not, that will produce purgation or bowel evacuation, induced bowel evacuation. Whereas if Triphala has the seeds in it and the seeds have been powdered along with the pulp, it can induce constipation. Does pipili mula also have sweet vipakka? No. That's a great question. The pipili mula does not have the sweet vipakka. The pipili mula has the katu vipakka. So thank you for picking up on that. Because at this stage, the pipili mula is actually much more stronger compared to the pipili fruit. And so the pipili mula has katu vipakka, okay? So these are some of the qualities. So it is crimigna, it helps to kill krimis, and that includes that it has this antibacterial, antifungal, and anthelmintic means it helps to kill parasites, okay? So the next one is chavya, okay? And this is very similar to pipili in the sense that actually it looks almost exactly the same. The main difference between pipili and this is that this is actually larger in size. So in classical texts, some synonym for this is gaja pipili, which means that it is a fatter or a much more robust, larger version of a pipili. If you see the pictures itself, you can see that this one is much more slender and long compared to these that are much more rounded at the base and much more thicker. So chavya is in the same family of pipili and also black pepper, but this is a much more robust, rounder version. So it's a different species of the plant. So it's the botanical name is Piper Chava. It's also, again, katurasa. The gunas are, it's laghu, like easy to digest, and it is ruksha, it's drying. Here the vidya is ushna and the vipakka is katu. Here the fruit is not madhura vipakka, but here the vipakka is katu. Okay, the qualities or gunas for this in what it exhibits, it is deepana again, it increases the digestive fire, it pacifies vata and kapha, and they have specifically indicated here that this one does increase pitta, okay? If used alone, it will increase pitta. The indications again, it used for shwasa, kasa. Shwasa is breathing difficulties, kasa is coughing, udara ascites, kushta skin disorders, prameha, specifically and especially used for ushas. It's very effective in ushas. Pliha, shula, pliha roga is splenic disorder, shula is abdominal pain or colic pain, anaha is flatulence, so it helps to reduce flatulence and that gas distension. Again, it's also it helps to prevent krimi. Okay, so here you can see it has very similar properties to Pipali Mula, more than just Pipali alone. But when they talk about Chavya here, they talk about using the fruits, not the root here. This is the fruit. Okay. The next is Chitrika. Chitrika is plumbago xylenica. Actually, there are two varieties of this plant. You can get the ones with the white flower, which is plumbago xylenica, and you have the one with the pink or reddish flower, and that's plumbago rosa. Okay, so there's two varieties of this plant. Usually we actually use both. For the most part, we tend to use the white variety or the white flower, but we can use the red one as well. They both have similar properties. So the rasa for this again here, katu rasa. The guna is it's laghu, ruksha, and tikshna. Virya is ushna or hot. Vipakka is again katu. It is deepana, kapha, vata, kafahara. It's also a rasayana. And it is virechaniya. It also induces purgation. Plus, it is grahi. So you think if it induces purgation, then what does it mean that it's grahi or it absorbs excessive moisture? Because typically we think grahi means that it would cause constipation. So the difference is in grahi is that it actually helps to absorb more amount of moisture from the surrounding tissues in the colon. So instead of it being too much of too watery or too moist, it actually can help to induce or absorb more amount of moisture, okay, from the surrounding tissues. So sometimes, depending on how much of quantity you're taking or how long of a duration you're taking this for, it can eventually produce constipation. But in the beginning, it usually doesn't. In fact, it helps to cause that apanavata to initiate the apanavata to move downwards. So that's how it ends up giving that virechaniya or that purgative effect. It's again, it helps in grahani, in pacifying grahani. Grahani hara means to pacify or to correct grahani. So there's no direct translation for grahani. Hopefully you all understand that by now. We've kind of gone over that topic a good few times. So I have not translated grahani because I expect you to understand what grahani means now. Also, similar indications: shula, abdominal pain, anaha reduces flatulence. Krimi, again, it helps to kill krimis or to remove krimis, which is worms, antibacterial, antifungal. Shotahara, which means it's anti-inflammatory. So we have some amazing combinations that are great anti-inflammatory herbs and herbal drugs, okay? And this is one of those ingredients. So for instance, if we have a combination of herbs, like polyherbal formula, and you have chitrika in there, you know that it can produce this, or it can exhibit anti-inflammatory properties as well because of the inclusion of this chitrika, okay? So, and it also specifically acts on Vataja arshas. Here they didn't just say arshas alone, they say it specifically acts on hemorrhoids due to Vata because of that specific action or that targeted action of moving the Apana Vata downwards or to pacify Vata. It's used in Kushta. Okay, so in Chitrika we can use the leaves, the stems, and also the roots. In the indication or in the combination, if you're using the root of Chitrika actually needs to be purified. So how you purify this is by using lime water. Lime is calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is lime. It's what they use in India to paint walls. They used to use that to paint walls. It's sort of a very cheap kind of paint. They also use it in certain types of have you ever seen them chewing betel leaves and the betel leaves, they apply this white paste on. It's in Hindi they call it chuna, which is actually the chemical composition of this is calcium carbonate. Okay, so you use calcium carbonate powder, dilute it in water, and this dried Shatrika root is washed in that water. So this Shatrika is slightly poisonous. And the reason why we wash it or purify it is to reduce that intensity of that slight toxin that it has. So when you wash it in that calcium carbonate water, it actually turns the water blue blackish. So you have to keep, that's the chemical reaction it produces. So you have to keep washing the root until the bluish blackish color reduces and you get all closer to a more clearer, whiter liquid. So that indicates that enough of a chemical reaction has happened that it has reduced that particular compound that is more toxic in nature. Okay, so this calcium carbonate helps to buffer that. So that once that is washed off, then it's dried again, and then that Shatrika root is used. Okay, so again, it's really good to learn these things the classical way, because if someone is supplying Shatrika to you without doing this sort of purification, and you're using just directly dried Shatrika, you may end up again with side effects. So when you're finding people getting side effects of taking Ayurvedic medicines, again, it's because we're not really aware of how it should be appropriately used. Okay? So if we go into the depth of it, we can really understand why it's producing these effects. In fact, in the classical text, they tell you. They've made it so easy for us, as they tell you directly, if you use this without purification, this is what's going to happen. Okay? So don't do that. Okay. So as you saw here, these are some of the indications for Shatrika. Okay? The next one is Nagara or Shunti. So this is the same thing, of course, as ginger. Nagara is the term, or Shunti is the term used for dried ginger. Okay, not just fresh ginger, dried ginger. And the difference between fresh ginger and dried ginger is fresh ginger, just like we saw with the pipali fruit and the pipali root, is the fresh ginger is actually somewhat more mild in comparison to the dried ginger. Have you ever had fresh ginger juice? And have you ever had like a pinch of dried ginger powder? The dried ginger powder will make you cough. It like immediately produces this extreme heat reaction, whereas opposed to the ginger juice, you can still somewhat manage that a little bit more than the ginger powder. Okay, so the dried ginger powder is a little bit more higher in the ushna quality or the potency compared to fresh ginger. And that's the reason why in classical texts and in certain formulas, they indicate which one to use. So that's why they have two different names. Adraka is the term for fresh ginger, and Shunti or Nagara is the term for dried ginger. Okay? So that's your question for today. What is the difference, or what's the difference between dry ginger and fresh ginger? Okay? And the answer is that the dry ginger is more potent than the fresh ginger. So the guna of the dry ginger is it's laghu, easy to digest, it's ruksha or drying, and it's also tikshna, it's penetrating. Vidya is of course ushna, and vipakka is madhura. It's still a madhura vipakka. Okay. The qualities, it's deepaniya, it increases, it's rasayana, it's of course again very similar properties to the other herbs as well. It's snigdha, it's rasayana, and it's also grahi. Yeah. Spell fresh ginger. Okay, fresh ginger is spelled A-D-R-A-K-A, adraka. Okay, adraka, and you got the spelling here for Shunti or Nagara. So the indications here, again, it's Rasayana, it's a rejuvenator, and it's also Grahi. It absorbs moisture. The indications, again, for Grahani for abdominal pain, for flatulence, for krimi. It's, again, anti-inflammatory, which we all kind of know quite well. Ginger does do that. Dried ginger is even more effective as an anti-inflammatory than fresh ginger. So this is a good example. If someone has a really chronic cough or cold or sinusitis or a kapha condition, instead of giving them fresh ginger juice, the dry ginger powder works much better in those chronic conditions compared to the fresh ginger juice. So we think, oh, well, ginger is ginger. What's the difference? No, there is a difference. Even if you're taking dry ginger powder and mixing it in liquid, it still will not have the same properties as if you're using the fresh ginger juice, okay? So even if it's dried and you're rehydrating it by adding it into a liquid, it's still more potent and stronger than the fresh ginger juice, okay? So when it's an extreme kapha condition and more chronic, your better choice would be the dry ginger powder. So again, Shotahara, it's anti-inflammatory, works very well in Arshas because of the fact that it helps to increase the Agni. It works very well in Kushta or skin disorders, and it helps it to relieve constipation. So you think here again, it helps to relieve constipation, but it also absorbs excessive moisture. So what does that mean? So there's a specific description or explanation for that in the classical text. It says that it has the power to break up the obstruction that causes constipation, but it will not push out the fecal matter, okay? So that's the reason why it helps in vibanda, or helps in constipation, and it also helps, it is grahi in nature as well. It can absorb the moisture, but even in absorbing the moisture, it helps to break up the matter for constipation. So in a person who's constipated, their fecal matter itself can be compacted or can be the blocking matter. So this helps to break that up. But you would still need something to help to move it downwards, okay? Okay, so this is one caution to keep in mind with ginger, especially. Ginger works really well in Vata and Kapha, but ginger absolutely can increase Pitta if these two have subsided. So in the first initial stages where you end up, or when you're first starting off at baseline, where Vata and Kapha are really predominant and Pitta is not really seen as much, that's the time when you can use as much ginger as you feel necessary. However, you need to keep in mind that once this Vata and Kapha starts to pacify, you want to try and taper off the ginger. Because once they have pacified, if you continue to take the ginger, it will aggravate Pitta, and you will end up with aggravated Pitta symptoms. Okay, so this is again another example of something you do not want to take for an extended period of time. You need to use this for the purpose of pacifying Vata and Kapha, then only use it until Vata and Kapha is pacified. Once they have come down and once they have pacified, stop the ginger and stop the dry ginger powder, okay? Because if you continue to take it, this will happen. And again, I'm using myself as an example. I've done this before. I have gone way too excited with the ginger candy because I was in love with the ginger candy. And what that did was I started eating or having ginger candy every day to pacify my cravings for something sweet. So I thought, okay, this is a great option, a great alternative. I'll have this. And so I had it. I was eating it every single day, just a little bit, but I was eating it every single day. So in the beginning, when I didn't have an issue with Pitta, it was okay, and I didn't feel that reaction. But after about 10 days of eating this ginger candy, and I didn't really have too much of Vata Kapha imbalance. So whatever slight imbalance was there before, that pacified and it normalized. And then I kept eating the ginger candy, and it started to aggravate my Pitta. And the symptoms that I found was I did start to feel, I started to feel somewhat of a burning sensation in my stomach. It was very mild. It wasn't too strong, but I did start to feel a slight burning. And what I also noticed was there was too much of heat, so much of heat in my body that when I would pass motion, it used exactly as they describe it with the pittaja type of bowel movement. The bowel movements would come out with a lot of heat. And you could actually feel that heat coming out of your body. You'd feel somewhat discomfort. There's some sort of discomfort, but more of with a heat factor or sort of a burning sensation. And I also started to feel almost like that perineum region was slightly itchy because there was so much amount of heat that was being generated because of this ginger. So being a Pitta Prakriti person, I'm naturally a little bit more inclined or very easy for my Pitta to get aggravated. So by eating ginger candy alone, even though I really loved it, the ginger candy after 10 days started to produce this increased Pitta signs, okay? So look out for that possibility. You do not want to eat or have too much of that ginger. Fresh ginger is said to be more sattvic of all the herbs. If not ginger due to its tendency to overheat, then what? So you can, again, use ginger, but you want to use it for a certain period of time. If you're using, again, that's a great question. If you're using the ginger as part of a meal or for a medicinal effect. Now, if you're using ginger, if you look at Indian cuisine, we add ginger into our food every single day. However, we use a small quantity of ginger. In proportion to the amount of food that you're actually mixing in with it, it buffers the effect of that ginger. So it's not such a high quantity or a high concentration. So for instance, if we're making like a big pot of khichdi, we use a knob of ginger in that big pot of khichdi. You're not going to expect it to eat the whole pot of khichdi all at once, right? So in the actual pot of khichdi, of the quantity that you take out to eat, you're probably getting just a small percentage of that knob of ginger that you've added into this big pot. So you see, the quantity itself is very less, and it is in synergy with the food that you're eating. So therefore, it helps to aid in digestion, and it doesn't produce that effect. However, what I was doing is I was taking ginger on its own, separate to my meal. I was using it separately. I was not using in combination with the food, but I was using it separately as something in its own entity. And that's why it produced more of that ginger effect. So again, look at the synergy. Look at what you're combining it with. Again, there's so many aspects we need to look at. It's not just the single herb, but it's how we're using it, what is the quantity of what we're giving, what is the frequency of how we're using it, and also what is it used along with, the anupana, okay? If we're using it as a medicine, or are we using it with our food, right? So that really helps to differ, again, according to how the body is able to process that. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is all about dried ginger. So the next one is maricha, or black pepper. So for those of you, if you haven't had a chance to see this, this is what black pepper looks like when it's fresh and when it's dried. So I was lucky enough to see this in Kerala when I was studying. I went to visit my friend's house, and there, nobody buys black pepper, by the way. It just grows wild. And so people just walk outside their house and they go and pick some green black pepper like you see over here, and they put it out to dry, and then they have dried black pepper, okay? And in certain dishes, they use the green one. But this is what black pepper looks like. And usually, of course, we use the fruit. This is a fruit. So we use the fruit in the black pepper plant, maricha. So the rasa is, again, katu. The guna, it's laghu, ruksha, and tikshna. It's ushna vidya, and it is katu vipaka. Prabhava here also, when it is in its fresh green state, as you can see over here, it is actually madhura vipaka. It is it's a sweet post-digestive effect. It is not very ushna at all. It's much more mild, and it's actually somewhat guru or heavy to digest. So this green version here that you see here, This is actually heavy to digest, and it's more of Madhura Vpakka, and it's not as Ushna. It's not very hot in potency. Whereas once it turns to this, it actually, because even drying changes the properties of this, okay? Which we could see the same thing happening with the ginger. When you dry it, it enhances the properties. Similarly here, from the fresh state to the dried state, the dryness actually helps it. What it does is, the dryness enhances the properties, okay? So the qualities associated, this again, it increases the digestive fire. This is a Rasayana. So of this pepper group, all of these are Rasayanas. These are known as, in Charaka Samhita, where they talk about Rasayana, he has described them as Vardhamana Rasayana. So Vardhamana Rasayana is where you, remember someone had asked this question in one of the earlier classes, where you start off at a certain dose and you keep increasing. So day by day, you increase it slowly till you get to the midpoint, and then from there you taper down and you start to decrease it slowly. That's what Vardhamana means. So similarly, what they do in using this as a Rasayana is it helps you process this with certain herbs, or you actually soak them in honey and a few other things. And then one of the fruits, you start off with one fruit, and then 3 fruits, and then 5 fruits, and then it just keeps going up. So you use one of the fruits, and then you get to the top point of the maximum tolerated dose, you could say, and then you taper down. And in that way, that actually helps to completely transform or cleanse the body completely. And in that cleansing process, it helps in rejuvenating. Okay? So that's one way of Rasayana with Maricha. It's again, of course, Vata Kapha. It's more drying or ruksha in nature, and it helps to absorb excessive moisture. Indication, of course, Grahani, Shula, Anaha, Krimi, Shotahara, Arshas, Vibhanda, or constipation. Aruchi, of course, it helps to induce taste, and this we know. That's why we add black pepper to anything to enhance the taste. And also it is used in hridroga, or in heart disease. Okay, so when we get to the heart disease module, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But this really helps in heart disease, specifically of Vataja and Kaphaja type of heart disease. Okay. The next one is Ajamoda, or ajwain, or celery seeds. So the most common way to find it now is just say celery seeds, because you'll find celery seeds at any grocery store. So Ajamoda has, again, Katu Tikta Rasa. This has 2 rasas in it, okay? It has the gunas are Lagu, Ruksha, Tikshna, Virya is Ushna, Vipakka is Katu. Similar qualities as the others. It is also Balya, which means it helps to impart strength. And it is Vrishya, it's an aphrodisiac. So when they describe that these Ushna substances are aphrodisiacs, what they mean is that it helps to displace the Shukra Dhatu in the body, and also helps to enhance the expulsion of that Shukra Dhatu, okay? So that goes for both men and women. They say that heat is needed, it gets generated in the desire for sexual activity, and in that process, that heat, as described in Ayurveda, what that does is it literally melts the Shukra Dhatu. The Shukra Dhatu is stored in the lower region of the body, but it's also stored throughout the body. And when that heat is produced due to that desire, it melts the Shukra Dhatu and then concentrates to the genital area, and that's when it helps for expulsion of that. So what these Vrishya or aphrodisiac drugs do, actually most of the Vrishya drugs are more hot in potency, because it does that, it enhances that effect. And it has that targeted site of action to enhance that effect. So that's how, even though being a hot potency drug, it actually is a aphrodisiac. Okay, and it's vidahi. It causes burning sensation. Okay. The indication, again, similar to all of the others. Some of the added special disorders that have been added in this, indications that have been added for this particular herb is it's used again in netra rogas or in eye disorders. It's also used for vasti ruja, which means vasti or basti. That is the urinary bladder. And if there's pain associated with that, did I hear you say this is celery seed? Yes, this is celery seed. Ajamoda is celery seed. Okay, so that's the easiest way to find it. It's celery seed. So ajamoda, usually when we use ajamoda, we use the seed, but you can, even the celery sticks itself has very similar properties to ajamoda, to the seed. Okay, seeds are slightly more concentrated. Yes, ajwain and celery seed is the same thing. Okay, it's not similar, it's the exact same thing. If you were to look up, for instance, an easy way to find this out, take this botanical name and type it into Google, and if you go to the images, you will see that it is celery. Okay, so this is the botanical name for celery, and this is the Sanskrit name for celery. We also use this ajamoda for eye disorders. It's also used in reduction or helping to reduce that pain and discomfort in the urinary bladder. It, again, of course, it enhances taste. So it's used in conditions like aruchi, where there's loss of taste or lack of taste. And also this is used or indicated in hridroga, here also for heart disease. Okay, the next one is bhalataka. So this is a slightly, ever so slightly poisonous plant. Not in the sense that it's really bad, it's because of it has this poisonous, slightly poisonous properties or constituent, that it's very potent and very active. So even poisons, if used appropriately, can be used as a nectar or medicine, one of the proverbs of Ayurveda. Okay, so in the rasa for this is, it's katu, tikta, and kashaya rasa. Its qualities are laghu, snigdha, it's not dry, this one is unctuous, and tikshna. It is ushna virya, and it is madhura vipaka, or sweet aftertaste. The qualities is deepana, again vata kapahara. Because it is sweet, vipaka, and because it is unctuous, it actually helps to impart strength. So bhalataka is used very widely for especially vata conditions where there is lack of strength, or when there is debility, or where there is lack of nutrition. Okay, this really helps to kickstart that. And it is shukrala, it helps to increase semen. The indications, again, similar to the others. Some added ones here is that it is used for kushta, skin disorders, constipation, gulma, abdominal tumors, and for vrana, all types of ulcers. So that's, infective ulcers, ulcers internally, and ulcers externally. Okay. Does this have a common name? The common name, usually you'll find it as semicarpus. I think it's also marking nut. I've seen it used as marking nut, but I'm not sure if that's the term that they use here. But I do know that this is available here. You can find bhalataka here. In fact, I think it grows, a lot of these herbs actually grow in Florida. I found that some of them are native to Florida because it grows. No, it's not the same as bala. So it has a very similar sounding name, but it is not the same as bala. Bhalataka is very different than bala. Okay. So its indications, again, it's used for kushta, for skin disorders. This works wonderful, and one of the main ingredients for disorders such as psoriasis, kapha vataja skin disorders, or vata kaphaja skin disorders. This is a must-have, or in a combination of herbs, this is a must-have for those sort of skin conditions. Okay, of course, works very well for Vibanda. So one caution, again, when this is used in Ayurveda, we never go and pick the fruit from the plant, dry it out, and use it as it is. It always needs to be purified. And this is, again, another basic thing that they teach us. It's very important that if someone is using this in a combination, or they're making the medicine of it, they have to follow the procedure where this needs to be purified first. Okay, it's never used as it is because it is a poisonous plant. So how do we reduce that poisonous quality? Similar to like what we did with Shatrika, that chemical reaction we wanted to do with the calcium carbonate. In this one, this is purified by boiling these seeds in cow's milk for 3 hours. Okay, so what we do is we tie the dried seeds in like a little poultice, and that is immersed in a big pot of cow's milk. And the seeds need to be completely immersed. We don't want to put it at the bottom of the pot because what that can do is the heat from directly at the bottom of the pot can burn the seeds and can burn off some of the active components. So what we do want to do is heat the seeds in the cow's milk to get the heat in, but not actually cook the seeds. Okay, so that's why it's immersed in the cow's milk and boiled for 3 hours, and then we collect that out of the pot, and that's then rinsed with warm water, then dried, and then we use it. Okay, so that's the procedure for purifying bhaladaka. Okay, so again, just by some herbs are there, they don't always tell you this because you're expected to know this beforehand if you go through learning through pharmacology, or at least doing some of the research. And it's not to say that you guys don't have access to this. If you start looking up the individual ingredients, a lot of this information now is online. Everything is online now. So you can find all of this information about these individual herbs if you just look it up. And they'll tell you. In fact, you can find all of this. If you don't have the classical text, all of this is available, and they have sourced it from the classical text. They'll tell you the reference of where they got it from. And the same thing, the properties, the rasa, guna, vidya, vipaka, and also how it needs to be purified. All of this information now is available online. So I'm really glad that you guys also have access to it. If you don't have the classical text, this information is out there. Okay? Okay, so bhaladaka is another very potent, very hot substance, and this is the reason why we use it. Usually when we use bhaladaka, we don't, again, ever use it alone. It's always in combination with other herbs, and the reason why it does is because it's very potent. Similarly with Shatrika, Shatrika is very potent. They're both slightly poisonous. So we do purify them to reduce that intensity of the poisonous substance. However, we still want that tikshna guna that is there associated with these herbs, because it really helps to provide that targeted site of action. It really helps to provide that immediate reaction with the Agni. Okay, so that's why this works really well, and this works very well in chronic conditions. Okay, so that's all about bhaladaka. And the next one is hingu, which you guys all got a chance to see, the very smelly stuff. So hingu, again, similar properties and qualities, katu rasa, laghu, snigdha, tikshna, guna, ushna virya, katu vipaka. Same, deepana, of course, increases the digestive fire, kapha vata hara, and this one does aggravate pitta. They have specifically, again, indicated here. The other ones, they just say, those which are just vata kapha hara means that it helps to pacify vata kapha, but it doesn't necessarily increase pitta. It may increase pitta if used too much. But there are other ones that indicate specifically that it will aggravate pitta are the ones that sort of gives you a clue. They're much more potent, and you need to be careful. Okay, so you need to be aware of how much you're using and how frequently you're using it. Okay, and for how long you're using it. So similar indications, Grahini, Shula, Anaha, Shota, Ashas, Vibandha. Here also Vata Ruja, because this has a specific action in moving the Apana Vata down. So one way for my nieces and nephews, they don't like Hingu, or they don't like asafoetida at all, because they say that whenever they have this or whenever we put it in the food, it makes them fart a lot. So that's the reason why, because it does. It will help to move that vata, that apana vata down immediately. And it does have a very quick effect. So that's why the one thing that they do absolutely know is asafoetida will make you fart. And the reason why is because it's getting all of the apana vata out, the excessive vata out. Should we assume then we buy hingwashika, the hing has been sauteed? I think it's better not to assume anything. I think it's better to just find out, because there are some companies that if they don't know, if they've just taken these formulas offline, or they have heard about it and they don't know the actual process of how these things work together, there may be the possibility that they have not done that. They have not sauteed the hingu. And that's the reason why you have the difference in variation of how different companies' products work, and they react with someone. You're getting the same hingwashtika from one company and the same hingwashtika from another company, but they smell completely different, and they produce two completely different effects. This is the reason why, because some of them don't do the shortcuts and they actually produce it the way it's supposed to be done, and that's why they don't smell as great, but they are very potent and very effective. And the others that are very concerned about the smell and the appearance of it, that have then compromised as to how it's done, and therefore they do not have produced the same effects. Okay. I tend to use the classical pharmacies, so I would use Kotakal or Ayurveda Pharmacy. Ayurveda Pharmacy, I think they also have some of their products available here in the US now. And the reason I use these is because these are classical Ayurvedic pharmacies. They have been trained. They know all of these things. It's been done for generations now. So there's no, and I have seen their pharmaceutical units as well. I was trained by them, in fact. So they're Ayurvedic pharmacies. All they do is make Ayurvedic medicines. They don't make any other medicines. And everyone who works there has been trained in Ayurvedic concepts. Either they're BAMS doctors or there are BAMS pharmaceutical trained people. So they know how to make it. They know what is the proportions. They know what is the standardization criteria as per Ayurveda. They're aware of all of that. So we really do trust, and though they may not be certified organic, they are very aware of their sourcing. They have been sourcing from the same farms and the same rural areas as they always have been for almost more than 100 years now. So I trust the traditional pharmacies, that their only job is to make Ayurvedic medicines the traditional way. Okay, so if you can, get that one. It may take a little bit more time for them to ship it to you, but that is definitely worth the wait. Okay. So this also is used again in Vasti Ruja, because it helps to all Apanavata related issues. It helps in that. It also helps in aruchi, or loss of taste, and also hridroga. And note again, always saute the hingu in ghee before combining with other preparations. Okay. So that's for hingu. And the last is guduchi, and we had talked a little bit about this in the other class, and one of the other classes, where we looked at the calcium content. So this is a very high or very strong alkaline drug, herb, naturally alkaline in nature. And because of its high calcium content, it works very well in reducing that burning sensation. That's why they have indicated specifically here is that it reduces, or it is used in daha. It is used when someone is suffering from burning sensation, when someone is suffering from thirst, or when that is either a premonitory sign or symptom or a symptom associated with a specific disease. This works really well in that, okay? Because it helps to really pacify that extreme pitta in that condition, okay? And even though it helps to pacify the extreme pitta, it also has a very specific added quality of increasing the agni. So that's, again, a nice trick of this herb is that though it increases agni and its specific quality is to increase agni, it does not increase pitta. It actually pacifies pitta. Okay, so that's one specific wonderful quality about this herb. So there is a mythological story as to where this herb came from and why it is used for so many different conditions, and it has so many wonderful therapeutic qualities. So they said that if you guys are familiar with the Ramayana, this is described in the classical text, by the way. At the time of the Ramayana, when Ram went to Lanka and he fought with Ravana, and Ravana was the king of the demons, and Ram was the king of Ayodhya or India at the time, and Ravana stole his wife and took her there, and he kept her prisoner, and so he went to fight him and to rescue his wife. And during the process of the battle of these two people fighting, Ram had an army of monkeys, and Hanuman was the leader of the army of monkeys. And so during this battle, a lot of the monkeys died. And so when the war was over, Indra, one of the demigods, was so happy that the king of the demons died that he sprinkled nectar, again amrita, or this divine liquid that would bring about immortality. So he sprinkled it onto the bodies of the monkeys to bring them back alive. And so he brought all of the monkeys back alive. And wherever this nectar fell off of their body and onto the earth, that is where guduchi started growing. That's why you find lots of guduchi in South India, where this story actually happened. Guduchi grows wild over there. And that's also one of the reasons why guduchi is also termed as amrita. It's one of the synonyms for this herb, because it has so many wonderful properties that it can impart or produce immortality. It can relieve you from so many conditions, also why it is Tridosha Hara. So notice, for garlic, also termed as amrita, and guduchi, also termed as amrita, okay? This is the reason why, because they both have these stories behind where they came from. Okay, so let me see some of the questions here. I have a feeling today we may go a little bit later, and if you guys are okay, I'm fine to stay a little bit later in the class as well. Okay, and my order was here in 2 days. Oh, that's great. Yeah, let me go back to this PowerPoint so you guys can see the rest of it. Okay, so here we go. So we have guduchi. So this is I wanted to just give you an idea as to all of the different kinds of preparations that we have in Ayurveda for medicines. It's not just powders alone, okay? So all of these herbs can be processed. One of them, so for instance, we can process these herbs in a fat-based product, and that can be either in the form of an oil or in the form of a ghee. We can also make it a water-based product, and that can be in the form of a decoction. Or we have also alcoholic preparations, which are asava or arishta. And also we have arka, which is distillation. So for instance, ajwain we can make ajwain arka or ajamoda arka, which is nothing but the same gripe water that you get for babies. That's actually celery seed distilled water, okay? If you smell it, If you see it, if you look at the ingredients, that's what it is. So in India, the gripe water that they get is actually made from the same thing. So little trick there. That's where gripe water came from. So Arka distillation, these are water-based products. We can also make the jams or the linctus, which is also known as either avalehas or rasayanas. And we also, if you process the raw drugs as they are, you can make powders, which is typically only one of the major forms that we get here in the US, or in the form of tablets or pills. But for the most part, what we're using is just the powders. But these same herbs can be processed in all of these different ways. And of course, ones that we don't really use here at all in the US is the metals and minerals. And in that, where we can use either the metals or minerals, the minerals processed with these herbs as well. So it's not just an inorganic, it's inorganic plus organic matter or organic herbs added to that and to make a formula. Okay, so we have bhasmas or compound formulas. So this is just to give you an idea as to all of the different kinds of preparations that we have in Ayurveda and the different products that we use. How do we make these, or how do we determine what do we make these formulas from? We have single drugs as medicines, which is typically, again, what we use here. And how we select these according to this term called agra aushadas. So in classical texts, they've again actually given us a clue as to which herb is the best for which condition. So for instance, guduchi is the best drug for treating all different kinds of fevers. It is the best drug. There's nothing better than guduchi. Okay, so guduchi is the agra aushada, or the drug of choice for jwara, or for fever. Like that, they have a long list of different conditions or different diseases, and which is the drug of choice for that. Okay, Bhavprakash Nigantu, which is the text I told you, which is the reference for all of this information that were there in the earlier slides. And that, again, he's given us all of this information about the single herbs, and they've given us all the different properties. We also have compound formulas, or compound formulations, and in that you have the formulas that are suggested by classical texts. We also have the ganas, which we now looked at today. We looked at a gana, which is a group of drugs that have similar qualities and similar properties, and that act specifically on these similar conditions. Okay, so we can group that together and make it into a formula, or we can pick and choose 2 or 3 of those drugs and combine them together to make a formula. And we also have in Charaka Samhita, he has given in Sutrasthana these different Kashaya Kalpanas. I believe it's in the 2nd chapter of Sutrasthana, where he's talked about different, again, groups of drugs that we can make into different Kashayas. And and he's also given you which indications or which diseases this formula can be used for. Okay, and now in this day and age, now there's people have started to come up with new formulas where they are mixing and matching according to availability and according to the properties of the drugs based on classical information. They're making their own formulas, and so they're modifying the classical formulas, and so those are known as proprietary drugs. And I just want to finish this one last thing so you get an idea as to how this acts. Okay, so for instance, an example here of Triphala. Triphala has specific known activities, or it has a known therapeutic activity that is indicated in the classical text when they talk about it. Okay, if we're using the same Triphala that is added into or added with other herbs, again, according to what properties we know they have, we can combine them to know that they give us a specific site of action, or a targeted site of action. So for instance, an example of this, we know ashwagandha works very well on the nervous system, right? We know also that milk gets absorbed immediately and starts working on the nervous system. So if we want to have ashwagandha work specifically on the nervous system or specifically for the brain, milk also passes the blood-brain barrier. So then that's the reason why ashwagandha is usually mixed with milk or taken with milk, because it enhances the bioavailability, and it enhances the targeted site of action specifically for the brain and for the nervous nervous system. Okay, so this is how we use these combinations, or we use again the traditional knowledge that is there in the classical text to figure out how we want to mix and match these herbal formulas to produce a specific effect. And so you can combine it in this way, and you can deliver it to the person, again, according to their specificity, what they like or what they don't like, or what their body needs. You can give it in the form of a tablet, in the form of a capsule, or in the form of a grita, a medicated ghee, or in the form of an oil. There are many different methods, okay? So I just wanted to give you guys a very slight idea. Of course, this can become very complex. I didn't want to overwhelm you with too much of that and make you more confused, which I always do. But I wanted to give you an idea as to, this is the reason why if we start to look at the classical description of these herbs, you will start to develop this understanding of how to mix and match these together. And that's kind of what I want you to do. I want you to be able to understand that and then use your inference and use your intuition as to what you think would be the best way for your clients. Okay? Okie dokie. So I know we are at the end of our time here, but I still want to leave it open for questions if that's okay. So non-dairy milk work the same as delivery. Non-dairy milk doesn't exactly work the same as delivery. So for instance, I don't know. I think goat's milk is still considered as dairy milk, right? Is it, or is it not? Is it? Yes, so goat's milk is still as dairy. And in that sense, so all those type of milks actually will work in a similar way. Cow's milk is considered the best out of the group of different types of milk, and there is a group of milk, by the way. For instance, in classical texts, they describe cow's milk, goat's milk, buffalo's milk. I think there's a donkey's milk. Almond milk, soy milk, rice milk does not work the same, because actually those don't really have milk. All it is what it's the watered down version of the flavors that are there in that, but they don't really produce actual milk. So it does not have the same properties or the same delivery system as milk does. So if you wanted to find a different alternative to milk, instead of using milk, nope, coconut, again, all of these are fruits or nuts. They don't have the same delivery system. They do not have the same reaction to the nervous system or to the past the blood-brain barrier as milk does. So, but there are other options. For instance, if we were to use other drugs or other herbs that are processed or made into a decoction, or made into or mixed with a fatty base and consumed that way, then you can still have that same similar sort of drug delivery. So for instance, if you wanted to, best way to go ghee if non-dairy. Yeah, ghee would be great, but I don't know if ghee would also be considered as dairy. Ghee is still, it's a dairy-based product. So I guess ghee would still be the same. It's in the same category. But if you wanted to do that, one of the best ways to still have a similar drug delivery is to process these herbs with an oil so that it's not dairy. And instead of being consumed internally, be given as a nasya. So in the nasya, what it does is this is sort of the doorway to the brain. And you still end up with the same delivery to the brain without it being digested. The milk digests and it works directly on the brain. It has to go through that process of metabolism and bioavailability. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want to use that optimal route, then the other optimal route is directly to the brain. So instead of going through digestion, it goes directly this way. Now, if you're using this route, the procedure is slightly different than if you're using this route. So according to which route of administration, again, is the easiest or suitable for your client, then you can choose that as well. Okay? Does that answer your question? Because there are other formulas that work quite well, as like for instance, instead of using, now this also would become dairy. Kshitabala is a combination that they used for making a type of oil that they use for doing nasya, especially for vataja conditions that work specifically on the brain and the nervous system. And that is used in the form of nasya. So kshitabala works very well. This is very similar effect, or even more enhanced effect than using ashwagandha with milk. So depending on the condition, we can use kshitabala for nasya. So for instance, if someone is so weak and so depleted that they can't handle the ashwagandha and milk, or they can't handle that internally, it will take too long to go through the process of digestion and metabolism and then getting there. Another option is to actually do the nasya with kshitabala that acts directly on the brain. It doesn't have to go through this process, it goes through here. Okay, so does that make sense? Okay, so would you guys, you're welcome. So do you guys have any questions? I know I kind of took over most of the time, but Hillary, it's up to you. If you guys would like to, if you want to stop the recording, we can. If you guys want to ask questions, we can keep going. I leave it up to you. Since today's the last class, today's the last class for the GIT module, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. You're welcome.
I think they're fried.
Okay, I know that was a lot of information. I knew I threw a lot.
You want to just tell them the dates of the next two, the ones that you're preparing for the August weekend?
So the next two, it would be on July 20th and August 3rd. Those are going to be, and it'll be the same time from 8 to 9:30. And what we're going to be covering is Pancha Nidana, which is Nidana, Purva Rupa, Rupa, Upashaya, and Samprapti. But we're going to be talking about this in detail, which is typically what you would learn if you were learning the prerequisites to pathology. This is actually what you would be learning about in detail in like a BAMS kind of syllabus. And also this is actually part of the practitioner curriculum as well. So it'll be great for you guys to cover that. And this information, it keeps applying in every single module. We wanted to get you the basics part and the introduction part and the revision part for the first module, but you're going to be able to use this added information in each and every one of the additional modules, where we're going to talk even more about Purva Rupa and Samprapti and how Upashaya is actually used. Okay, and that really comes into play with the next module for neurology, because we do use quite a bit of Upashaya there. Okay, so this, we're going to try and cover all of the description of the Pancha Nidana in the two webinars.
Super, great. Okay, I will download this recording and get it up for everybody. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. I hope I didn't overload you too much.
Thanks, Anusha.
You're welcome. Bye. Good night.